Throughout the game, you were so observant of subtle details, whether it was how Jack was tossing and turning at night or how people carried themselves. And that final face off, what was it about Andy's reaction that tipped you off and made you realize that he had picked the right box?
Yeah, so I've learned so much from my previous experience that I made sure I did some research. And one of the big things I researched was body language. Something about Andy's, he is a very charismatic person. And I made sure to hone in on that and notice that he wasn't displaying anything anymore. I really wanted to come in and know that I can trust my instincts, know that I can trust the research that I did, and it really paid off observing everybody throughout the game. If I hadn't done that from the beginning, I would not have been able to catch on to these little subtle changes.
That might actually be the answer to this next question. But since you did compete on Survivor, was there anything that you brought into this game that you hadn't realized going into your first season of that franchise? Because I do feel like there are a lot of pitfalls that first time players fall into that you didn't on the Anonymous.
Something I really brought with me into the Anonymous from Survivor is not only that people tend to actually gravitate towards me naturally because of my own charisma, my own curiosity, the way that I approach people, because I really do enjoy people and I find them very interesting. So, really hone in on that. Don't be scared to interrupt conversations, join conversations. Not only that, but also reel in a bit of the chat because sometimes I can say a little bit too much and that can cause a lot of red flags that do not need to be there. And so it was definitely a learning curve and something that I knew I could do from the second I heard what the Anonymous was, a covert deception game, backstabbing alliances in person and behind a handle. I was like, this is tailor made for me.
There was also a point in the game when Christopher called you the silent killer, which feels so accurate. Early on, you were flying under the radar, not getting any votes for nominations. And when you did, you started winning safety back and back. And even when the Anonymous had chances to take you out, they didn't. How did you minimize your threat level while still making so many big moves?
I play from the shadows. I am a talkative person. I am charismatic. People gravitate towards that. They love that. The more I become your friend, the harder it is to get rid of me. And that goes for everyone, including myself. If I become friends with somebody, I'm going to hesitate. I'm going to double think things. And that's something that I really wanted to make sure I did with as many people as possible. And obviously I did because they looked at me and they were like, man, this is my friend, or this is somebody that I get along with. Also, a fun, quirky, talkative girl. Yeah, she's strategic, but they kind of start downplaying it. And that's something I really liked about the Anonymous is that half of it was behind a handle. So I can do what I need to do back here without anyone catching on to me too early. I know Christopher did call me the silent killer, but it took him a little while to get there.
Yeah.
And that's the important part. I was getting safety. I had the confidence in myself to play from the shadows, align with those that I knew one, I would build a really strong relationship with, but that could take me far. And then three, get safety when you really need it.
At the end of each episode, the eliminated contestant reveals what avatar they were in anonymous mode. How much weight did you put into those reveals, and how did that shift or alter your strategy?
I put a little bit of weight into it. I got information, right? I know what this person was now, what their handle was. I know where they voted and the decisions they made and certain things that they said in the chat. That allowed me to kind of do that reverse research to say, okay, this is what their voting pattern was. I didn't connect them
Mm.
because of XYZ, or it allowed me to find those blind spots that I had and constantly reevaluate and say, okay, now I do feel really confident about this handle, or now I need to revisit this handle. That's something that I took from Survivor. I need to be able to adapt. And I feel like every day in there, I was trusting in myself to constantly observe and constantly be ready to do whatever I needed to do to figure out the next steps to move forward.
I think what's so fascinating about this competition series is that balance between building those personal connections and also knowing when to prioritize what's best for your game. And in Survivor, it's a tribe who decides who goes home. But in this game, every vote matters. Was there ever a point when you were the anonymous, or maybe if you had been later in the game, where you considered eliminating somebody like Dylan to better hide your identity?
If that was presented to me, absolutely, I would have considered it. There's a few moments where you see me talking to myself, Nina, this is a game. This is a game. You have to separate the two. And I also really enjoyed aligning with people in the game like me. They understand you have to separate the two. We're
Yeah.
obviously not going to tell each other, hey, I'd get rid of you. But we have that mutual respect. And sometimes it's okay when you come out of the game with those people. Sometimes it's not. But at the end of the day, I knew what I was signing up for. It wouldn't have been easy. I honestly probably would have been in my hideout, pulling my hair out. But when you have to make a hard decision to get to
Yeah.
the end, there's really no other choice.
I think that's what makes you such a great game player is that you're able to separate that. Unlike Xavier, you were able to hide your identity for a lot of the game. What was the game plan if Jack had come in with more conviction about you being Sandra's daughter, or even Wayne coming in saying that?
If anyone had identified me as Sandra's daughter and nothing else, my argument, what I thought would be effective, would be, well, what do your parents do? Let's talk about everybody's parents if that's what we're going to bring up. I get it. Yeah, I understand, but we are two different individuals. Do you have a sibling that everybody compares you to? How annoying is that? Do you have a best friend who people are constantly comparing the two of you? That's annoying, isn't it? So let's not do that. And hopefully it would have been effective. Of course, I would have phrased it differently for each individual person. Some
Yeah.
people take things really well when you're straight up and blunt. Other people take a little bit of, oh, let's use a comparison or anything that kind of can get them to see it visually. But that would have been my argument, and I really hope it would have been effective. But good for me, I didn't have to worry about that.
I also find it so interesting. When you were on Survivor, you got to compete against returning players. And in this game, there's so many first time players. How different is that experience when you're competing against people who have experience versus don't?
I find people who have experience are willing and able to get to the nitty gritty from the jump. There's no need for the fluff of getting to know each other. It's very important to create those bonds, but it doesn't have to last more than one day or one conversation. They're willing to kind of jump to the end, which I was too, obviously coming in here. But with new players, you kind of have to weed out those who aren't willing to do that. There are certain people, when you come across them, you're like, no, they do want you to kind of get to know them to get to that point. There's other people where you're like, oh, okay, they're fidgeting around like me. They're ready to get this ball rolling and get the game going. And that's something that I find in myself. I'm very confident with my ability to differentiate those two kind of players, whether they're returning
Mm.
or not.
I think that fast-paced environment suits your game style. I got one final question for you, but since this is the first season of The Anonymous, you set the standard for how this game will be played moving forward. What aspect of your strategy do you think played the biggest role in securing your win, and what do you hope future players adapt from it?
Timing is everything. We've seen players throughout our season do things right when they need to be done or do things and they fall flat. And it's really unfortunate, but timing is everything. And also confidence in yourself. Do not be afraid to put that foot forward. You might not know the results until the next day, but at least you were confident in what you needed to do. And so timing is the most important thing, and being able to differentiate each player and the way you need to approach them. You can time, as you can see, I did multiple conversations. Dylan, number one person, I made sure to let him know people are talking about you. Let's see what happens. I made sure to go to Christopher. Hey, people are talking about you. When Jack started getting a little, hey, do y'all see what he's doing? But each person matters. I never went to Dylan and told him anything
Mm.
about Jack because I didn't want to hinder that relationship because Dylan's going to say something, so making sure that you can say certain things to certain people that won't bite you in the butt.